Well, welcome to the furthest Rhodesian outpost in the jungles of the Philippines. I am here with Jim Mann, or Jeremy Mann as he's correctly known, but Jim to his mates. Jim is ex-BSAP, and it's my great pleasure to interview him for Fighting Men of Rhodesia. So Jim, you're a POM. How did you end up in Rhodesia and in the Rhodesian police?
I am a POM. When I was about 18, I decided to join the BSAP. I'd heard of it because I'd been in the British Army for a short time as a young guy. I joined the Royal Military Police because I had intentions to be a police officer. I was in Germany, I was fairly bored with that, and some guys in the corporal's mess in Dusseldorf, had a recruiting brochure for the BSAP. I'd never heard of them, I didn't know where Rhodesia was, but it looked good. And I wasn't having much adventure in Dusseldorf, as you can imagine. So I applied to the BSAP by writing to them, and a lot of correspondence followed, back and forth, medicals, forms, etc., etc. And eventually, incredibly, I was accepted for the BSAP. So the next thing that happened was I left the army. I was actually working in a carpet warehouse at the time in York, my hometown. And my dad walked into the warehouse one day and said, "Hey, you've got a one-way ticket to Rhodesia here, one way to Salisbury, via Frankfurt and Joburg." So I was on the plane. A couple of weeks later, my dad gave me £5 to travel with, which wasn't going to last me long. I spent that before I left England and flew to Rhodesia. I stayed at the Holiday Inn at Jan Smuts Airport when I got to South Africa, and then flew up on the old Viscount to Salisbury. I was met by the recruiting team that was then led by Fred Mason, RIP sadly, great guy. And there was 2 or 3 other recruits on the plane that I didn't know. Nobody had told me they were going till we got on the ground in Salisbury. We were taken away in a bus to, I think it was the Courtney Hotel in the Avenues, where we stayed the night. Of course, there was no bar in there, so that was obviously the idea that the BSAP had imposed there was no drinking. So we went to the Park Lane instead, had a few beers, and we all sat around talking. There was a few more recruits in there, local guys and South Africans. And the next day we went to PGHQ and more or less got sworn in straight away. And that's how it started. So I was in the Rhodesian police. I didn't even know where Rhodesia was, as I say, but I soon found out. So that was my entry to Morris Depot, the famed training school, or training depot.
Can you remember your service number, Jim?
I can remember my service number was 9448. The guy standing behind me, who became my best mate, was another Pommy called Phil Smith. Some of you will remember him, and he was 9449. He's dead now, bless his soul. He got killed in action in Angola some years after he left the force, but he left the police, went to RLI, then went down to South Africa to the Reckies, and eventually ended up in Angola as a freelance guy. He was killed there, sadly. But yeah, so we went to Morris Depot, had the obligatory haircut. None of us had any hair anymore. The English people didn't like that at all. And began our training, which was quite hard but interesting. So what did the training consist of? Well, the most memorable thing about the training in the BSAP, and I had no idea it was going to happen, was learning to ride a horse. I had riding horse Gurkha was my mount. I'd never been on a horse in my life. The only experience I'd had on 4 legs was a donkey on Scarborough Beach, a seaside town in England, where I paid 6pence to go for a donkey ride when I was about 6. So I hadn't had much experience of riding, to say the least. And it was 6 months worth of riding about the riding school and across the golf course, etc., near Morris Depot, learning to ride these horses, which I wasn't very good at. And most of the Brits weren't very good at that. Some of the Rhodesian guys were better because they'd grown up on farms. But us Pommies had been in nightclubs and bars and things in the back streets of Yorkshire and other places. We didn't ride horses. So that was a character building experience. There was about 16 of us in our squad. 5 were POMs, well, foreigners anyway. We had a couple of Vietnam War veterans, it was 1975, and 2 or 3 English policemen, and the rest were Rhodesians and some South Africans. So that was the depot. What else did we do? Nothing I hadn't done before as far as marching and shooting, etc. was concerned. But it was great fun. And what I was amazed at in Morris Depot, Ron Trangmar, by the way, was the depot chief inspector. Some of you will know him. Great guy, hard but fair, they say. But amazingly had Batman. You got to the BSAP Morris Depot, and you went to the Q stores, and you got your massive amount of uniforms, number 1 dress, number 2 dress for everything. Pair of high heel shoes, boots, leggings, and all that sort of thing. And we also got issued with a rifle. Mine was 8995. The horse, RH Gurkha. A Batman called Lovemore, and various other bits and pieces of kit and Katundu. I was amazed that we got Lovemore, a Batman each, because they did your boots and shirts and all that sort of thing. There were so many uniforms, you'd never have had time to clean it all if you had to do it yourself. But it was just unusual to me in a military depot that you would have, you know, a Batman issued to you. However, it was great. The training, other than the damn horses, was coin training, so counterinsurgency. The first week was out in Chikarubi, which is now a prison. And the second week we did in Yanga, running about in the hills and sweating a lot. But that was great fun and different and very good training actually. Knackering, but good training. So that was the coin training, the horses, musketry, drill, PT, every day. First aid, of course. And then the other bizarre thing was we had to learn to type, touch type. The instructress was Annie Lovell, she's dead now as well. So we were all sat there, 16 or 17 blokes, with a cover over the typewriter keys going like this, ding, 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 to learn to type so we could do our police dockets when we later became real policemen. So that was part of the training. It was great. It was really enjoyable. We got to have some fantastic mates.
Lots of legal training.
Oh yeah, sorry, law and police. I missed that. Yeah, law and police was good, quite intensive, and of course all these things were examined when you concluded. So as far as the squad went, an English ex-policeman was first in the squad, top recruit. An English guy was second. I was third, and it went on like that. So the foreigners did very well actually in the depot. Yeah. Probably because we were a little bit older and a bit more streetwise, if you know what I mean. You know, the Rhodesian lads were lovely lads. They'd been in Rhodesia, brought up there. It was a very kind of gentle life for them. They weren't on the back streets of Manchester and Liverpool and all Glasgow and all these other horrible places in the UK. So we certainly acquitted ourselves well in the depot. And then of course we were dispersed to the 4 corners of the empire as far as Rhodesia went, and off we went on our various tasks and duties and postings. My first posting was an observer, a passenger, in a B car, one of our patrol, the blue and whites that we used to run around Salisbury and Bulwer. I did that for a short while. Then we went back, after we'd passed out, we went back from our postings to the driving school. So you got trained in Land Rovers, did your test. I already had a driving licence. But you would learn to drive in Land Rover you couldn't drive. And then we did motorcycles. And I quite fancied myself as a bit of a biker. I'd had bikes in the UK. The first corner I went round when we first went out on the Yamaha 350RD Yamahas with the bikes. I crashed and broke my collarbone because I was showing off in front of everybody else and couldn't ride. I thought I could, but obviously not. So I broke my collarbone. Somebody had to come out on another motorbike and tie me to his back with a belt and took me to the Andrew Fleming Hospital. So then, because I'd broken my collarbone, I couldn't really be an observer in a B car anymore. So I went to Crime Prevention Unit in Salisbury, CPU, which was a plainclothes unit with plainclothes vehicles, mainly deploying African constables in the night time to do observations for house breakings and theft and things. But we covered a whole multitude of sins. If they wanted another guy to go somewhere, the CPU guy went there. And we did, so it was a multitasking role. But again, good fun. I was there for about a year maybe. Then for some reason they punished me and sent me to traffic. I spent a few months in traffic, but by that time I'd applied for CID, since I had previous experience in police work from the military police. So I applied for CID, thank God I got CID, so after about 18 months in the police, I was a detective, firstly in narcotics, which was fun, and then I got a bit better at it and I went to homicide, quite successfully, made quite a few arrests for different murders that had happened.
So you're no longer a uniformed?
No, I was in CID, that was plain clothes as well. Yeah. You actually got about $2 a month as an allowance for plain clothes, so we weren't the best dressed guys in town. So yeah, CID, I was there for quite a long time. And of course in those days with the war, CID was a month in town and a month in the bush as a sort of CID SB guy, you know, interviewing prisoners, catching prisoners, deploying the army, and things like that, which I absolutely loved. Base camps, several, for years. I lived underground, under a railway sleeper, with sandbags on top of it, and all the comforts of home. Not. I did sometimes wonder why I'd come from England, discotheques, fancy clothes, and I was now sitting underneath a sandbag in the Rhodesian bush. But that's another story. But it was worth it. It was good fun.
Jim, could I, in homicide, were there lots of homicides during that time?
The European detectives tended to look after homicides that involved a European as the victim or the complainant. Right. Well, didn't complain because they were dead. But yes, we used to do that. It was the full Monty, forensics, photographers, all that sort of thing, scenes of crime. CID was a very all-encompassing, body of people, and we had the equipment, some equipment, and a very good pathologist, and all that. All the stuff you see on television was like the homicide team. I was the national homicide team, so we went where we had to go. Notably, 2 or 3 murders spring to mind. 1 or 2 were committed by Europeans. Most of them were committed Africans on Europeans, but there was exceptions. I managed to catch a couple of guys, and they actually got hung at Salisbury prison or wherever it was, and that was an interesting job. I loved that, and I had some good friends there. There were some brilliant older detectives there amongst the Europeans, DCIs, superintendents. I won't name them, but there was I learned a lot, and they were great mentors and friends to us young guys. So yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. I must mention the African police, who were our detectives. Amazing people, and if there was an African on African type crime, serious violence or homicide, they would go out by themselves sometimes and canvass the area, door-to-door inquiries, all that, or the equivalent hut-to-hut inquiries, if you like, and had some fantastic detection ability. There was very rarely that they didn't catch the guy straight away. One case with the Africans I remember, excuse me, was going out. We used to line up in the morning to the DC, the detective chief inspector, and he would give us our bodies for the day. And it was DCI Jock McCullum. We lined up there 7 o'clock in the morning, and he deployed us every day, depending on what scenes there were, what had happened. So I got one once. It was an African baby or a small child, which was found on a rubbish dump in one of the townships. May have been Highfields, I can't remember. But one of the townships. So I went there with an African sergeant and an African constable in a little Renault 4. As you know, we used to use Renault 4s quite often, sanctions and stuff. Anyway, got to the scene, went to this rubbish dump, dug through that in my best suit, and eventually pulled out this body which had 1 arm and 1 leg missing. And it was well eaten by rats. So I had a brilliant brainwave that day. I said to the Africans, what's happened here? Why is this child dead? Why is his arms missing? It was obviously some sort of violent crime and bleak murder. They said it could be witchcraft, sir. So I said, okay, let's go and see the nearest Nanga, the nearest witch doctor in this township. They were very reluctant to do that. Anyway, I made them do it, so we went there, knocked on this guy's front door. He wasn't dressed as a witch doctor with skulls hanging on his neck and stuff. He was dressed in an old pair of jeans and things. And we showed him this body. It was in a plastic bag with an evidence tag on it in my boot. So I got the body out. There you go. What is this about? He said, that is a spell for Makasa, cards, gambling. So these guys, whoever they were, the perpetrators, had chopped this poor kid up, infant, and dumped it on a rubbish bin. I assume they'd kept the arm and leg for this spell they were creating to make them lucky at cards. Anyway, just a quick sequel to that. Years and years and years later, when I was working in a similar vein in London, England, a long time ago, there was a body found in the Thames, a small African child with a leg and an arm missing. So I thought, I watched it on the news in England. I thought, my God, that sounds familiar. And I phoned the Metropolitan Police, who were the investigating force, and I spoke to the detective in charge of the case, and I said, listen, I was a policeman in Rhodesia. It was now then Zimbabwe, of course. I've had a crime like that myself, arm, leg missing, small black child. I said, it's a gambling spell for possibly Southern African natives, amongst others. Okay, thank you very much. And it turned out they let me know, it was actually, that's how they solved the case. So I was lucky that I just had a bit of local knowledge which helped an international police force.
Sure.
Yeah, so that was homicide, very, very good fun, great, I learned an awful lot, the guys were fantastic. Eventually, I was asked to go to Special Branch, which I was advised, don't go, Jim, it's much more action and fun in CID, but I did it anyway. So I went to Special Branch, and that was a grind to start with, fairly boring in town, post office, airport, that sort of thing. But eventually I got posted down to Chirezi, the Jock at Chirezi, and the Jock's base camps. So that would be Malapati, Impagati, places like that were under the jurisdiction of the Jock at Chirezi. Got to know a lot of people, had great fun down there. We had a camp attack one night at Malapati, which I won't bore you with the details. That was exciting. The war was in full swing by then. It was like 1979. And then after Chirezi, I got posted to Victoria Falls, which was, you know, I don't have to tell you, fantastic posting. I was in charge of SB Victoria Falls. Then SB transitioned into what they call the Central Intelligence Organisation, which had always been in Rhodesia, but it was kind of the MI6, if you like, of the BSAP. But it wasn't BSAP anymore. You were paid differently in a different pay scale. You were more of a civil servant than a policeman, but it was the intelligence service. I didn't have a choice. SB Special Branch was disbanded when Mugabe got into power, and we all were transferred to CIO. So at Victoria Falls, I became the CIO guy eventually, as opposed to the SB rep, and lived my life at Victoria. By then I got married, of course, to a Rhodesian nurse from the Andrew Fleming Hospital. That's a story in itself. It's now the Parionet where I believe. So we went to Vic Falls together, myself and my new wife, and we had a great life there. You know, good friends, cold beers, beautiful scenery, wildlife in every sense. It was a great place to be. So I finished off eventually my BSAP CIO career. The police had become the ZRP by then, God bless them. So the Zimbabwe Republic Police had taken over from the BSAP very badly. And most of us decided it was about time to go. So I ended up leaving from Victoria Falls in 1982, having done, 6, 7, 8 years in the force, and just had the best time of my life. And I've been all over the world since and done all sorts of exciting jobs. They were never exciting as a BSAP. It was the best period of my life.
Yeah. BSAP set you up, Jim, in many ways that prepared you for what turned out to be quite a fascinating career.
Yeah, well, it actually, the BSAP, without a doubt, created me and opened doors that would never have been opened to me. For example, I didn't want to leave. I was having a fantastic life in Rhodesia, but it became Zimbabwe, so it was time to go, as far as I was concerned. You know, there was accusation of spying, flying around for South Africa, which of course happened on several occasions, several people. I wasn't spying for South Africa, but it was getting everybody. I was having the finger pointed. I was just trying to do my job at Victoria Falls. You know, one of my jobs at Victoria Falls was to travel once a week on a Friday to the Botswana border, Kazangula border post. So I used to drive on that strip road from the falls about 100 k's to the border post, where I had some constables. I used to change them over once a week. So every Friday, this is about safaris, every Friday, on that Kazangula road, I used to be in a rush because I was a young guy and I was always in a rush. I used to have a herd of elephants crossing that narrow strip road on the Kazangula road. I used to get stuck for an hour watching these elephants walk across the road, and wild dogs and God knows what. Which used to, at the time, I'd be screaming out, "Come on!" You know, but they were just living their lives, and I was impatient. You'd pay thousands now to see the wildlife and game I saw up there. Again, what a fantastic experience, out of this world. It won't ever happen again, you know. So yeah, I went back to the UK against my will. I was a very sad, lonely puppy in the UK. I hated it, having gone back from my life in the BSAP. But I did that, and within about 3 months, sorry, the telephone's going. Hang on. Sorry, Jim.
Sorry, Jim, you were saying you were back in the UK?
Yeah, I was back in the UK, and obviously looking for a job that would give me the same kick as the BSAP, but it was very difficult. But I'll come back to just you asked me about the Hondo experience. I've got a few interesting tales to tell. No big deal, everybody was doing it. I don't think I was a war hero by any means, but I was certainly involved in the war. And a memorable one, I mentioned Malapati base down in the Gonera Zoo when I was working under Jock Chirezi from Buffalo Range and all that. I was at Malapati base, which is an old zookeeper's lockstat, like a brick building and not much else on the Nuanetsi River. So I was there one for a few weeks with a guy called Bev Morris, who'd been a national serviceman, he'd signed regular, fantastic guy. I've never been able to find him since we left the force, but he was a young guy, he was a great bloke. And we were in bed one night at 9 o'clock, obviously lights out, sleeping in your underpants, webbing an FN rifle under your bed, stretcher. And there was this almighty crashing and banging. Funny enough, that day we had a in camp that was a capture that we were going to interrogate the next day. He was tied up in a bunker about 20 metres from our billet, the brick building. There was no fence on this base camp, so you had, the back of it was the Rhodesia River flowing, and the front of it was just open bush and the sides. Fortunately, the day I got there was a new thing called Adams grenades that came out for the issue for police base camps. It's like a claymore type thing, but it had a 360 detonation, would sit about 3 or 4 feet on a pole, and it was detonated from a command bunker with a car battery. You connected the car battery, pushed a button, they were all 4 corners of the camp. Anyway, this almighty crashing and banging came. A rocket came straight through my roof. I couldn't see in the dark, but it missed me by about an inch. I could feel it go past. So I rolled out of bed, and Bev Morris had, it was pitch black, remember, and it was also disorientating. And he put his webbing on and was crawling about in what would have been the lounge at the zookeeper's camp, and crawled into his wardrobe. I could hear him shouting, Jim man, where are you? He was lost in the wardrobe. Not intentionally, he was up for a fight, but he was lost in the wardrobe, so I had to go and get him. And then we went outside. Anyway, long story short, they revved us, gave us a good rev in rockets, mortars, and obviously small arms fire as they moved in. We had 2 police reservists on the camp as well who'd never been to the bush before. It was their first call up. They were old boys, you know. I mean, I'm an old boy now. But they would be men of 55, factory managers and stuff from Salisbury, the reservists. And it was a rude awakening for them, I must admit. Anyway, they acquitted themselves well. The next morning we had a sweep line, about first light basically, and swept through the bush that was in front of us. Obviously they couldn't get across the river with ease, so we swept where they'd attacked the position that the fire had come in from. There was 50 firing positions, thousands of doppies, expended cartridge cases, which of course we as SP were interested in collecting and getting analysed at the ballistics down at the armoury in Salisbury. So we collected every batch of doppies and put them into separate envelopes. This was our exciting job. And, you know, did this looking for documents. There was drag marks where one of the guys had run away because I'd detonated the Adams grenades. So they'd gone bang. So that stopped the attack, which was, thank God we had them. I'd also built a mortar pit with an old captured 60mm mortar right in front of the command bunker outside the accommodation, which we used. And that seemed to be effective as well. If we hadn't had those defences, since there was no fence line or anything, we'd have been goners. And that would have been 4 guys gone, plus the African constables, plus the dead, or the that we were going to interview. So yeah, that was quite an exciting scene. And of course, their fire had blown our water tower, our water container up. So we had no water thereafter for about 6 weeks. We couldn't get out. The bridges had already been blown. So we used to go into that base camp in a police reserve air wing Cessna, which was also full of bullet holes. That's how you got in and out of the base camp in those days. But so you couldn't drive out, so we were stuck. Nobody could come and rescue us or take us away, or we couldn't get out. The plane wouldn't land for some reason, and we were actually unwashed for 6 weeks. There was no water. Even drinking water was at a premium, to say the least. And the other thing we'd done, after the attack, we wanted to get some intel about how had they been surveilling us, etc., etc. So we did what's euphemistically termed in special branch jargon as witness pickups, where you collect the locals who you think might have seen them, fed them, whatever. And we had 200 in a camp built for 20 people. So they were all bathing and abluting in the old Rhodesia River there. So you didn't really want to drink that water. So it wasn't a fun experience, but it was character building. Yeah. So that was one. Several more contacts over various periods of time in various base camps, usually vehicle ambushes. And of course, towards the end of the war, they were starting to put the old TM46s at the scene of where they'd ambush a TM46 detonation, you know. So you'd hit a mine, or the front vehicle of the convoy would hit a mine. He'd be out, front wheel blown off, back wheel blown off, probably injured from the bump. And then they'd attack. So all the vehicles behind him were stationary, including our SB Land Rover with no doors. And you'd get revved. So that was also quite often happening towards the end of the war. So that was character building as well. I mean, many, many more, just like all the SB guys, CID guys. We were all touched by it in some ways. But again, I mean, war's a terrible thing. People die. Lots of my friends were injured and killed, legs blown off, etc. But myself personally, I never actually got hit or shot. And, you know, so if I dare say it, I enjoyed the time I spent at war in Rhodesia. And that's the bottom line, being brutally honest.
I'm quite good friends with Winston Hart. Winston was very involved with the Slough Scouts. Did you have much to do with the Scouts?
The Scouts, no, they were at the fort at Bindura. The SB were heavily involved because Mac McGuinness was the SB rep with the Scouts permanently. Great bloke he was. So I'd been in Bindura for a while. I actually got sent as punishment to Bindura to dig up bodies that were about 6 months old that had been buried in wet soil, because I was a naughty boy in Salisbury once, and so they sent me to recover these bodies, which I did. Beautiful job. But the fort was at Bindura, so we kind of had a bit of truck with the Scouts. I met Ron Reed daily, funnily enough, in the bar in Jockchurch. Had a drink with him. But I never actually worked physically with the Scouts, no. They were in the area, frozen areas, where I was, a artillery base camp in the Sabi TTL. You know, we'd be driving along in an SB convoy, that's 2 vehicles, and you'd suddenly see, you're in a frozen area, get out, you wankers, or whatever. But you'd see the odd Scout running about with bare feet and shaved heads and all that weird stuff they used to do. Not for me, but, you know, it was part of life in Rhodesia. So no, I wasn't working with the Scouts. Funny enough, in my life since, I've stayed in the security and law enforcement game, obviously. And everybody who's an ex-Rhodesian seems to have served in the Sleuth Scouts. It must have been a massive unit for them all to be. Me, I'm quite proud to say I was in the BSAP only, and I was absolutely more than happy with that. So no heroics, you know. I wasn't in the SAS, God bless them, or the Scouts, but I was quite happy with my service.
Yeah. Jim, you're in the Philippines now. And,
I am in the Philippines now.
Can I ask you, how did you get to know about me?
I saw you on Facebook or something. I'm not a brilliant IT guy, so I do catch bits and pieces of clips from all sorts of different angles that come into my phone. I don't understand how to work it, but occasionally I get lucky and had the great pleasure to meet Mr. John Wessels, who nearly bought me lunch the other night. We did have a beer or 2, I'm glad to say. So that's why I'm here in the Philippines now speaking to him. We're actually on a beautiful island of Bohol, which John lives in the jungle. I live in a luxury hotel, but only for a couple of days. So that's what we're doing here.
Yeah, I must say, it's been an absolute pleasure to meet Jim and his girlfriend, and we had a great evening, and we decided that we want to try and put together some sort of Rhodesian association of guys living maybe in Southeast Asia. I don't know how many we'd get if we just limited it to the Philippines, but perhaps if we include, I know some guys in Vietnam, for example, and I'm sure there's some in Indonesia, maybe Bali, and even places like Japan and Malaysia. So
if you're out there,
if you're out there, please get hold of either myself or Jim. Jim's on Facebook, let's put something together and let's aim to have a gathering at some central point, you know, and we can all maybe aim for like a memorial service on November the 11th. Those type of gatherings that we can get together as ex-Rhodesians.
Including cold beers.
Yeah, of course.
San Miguel it is here, not Lionel Castle. San Miguel. It's good enough.
Absolutely.
If you keep practicing.
Yeah. So Jim, you had a couple more stories you wanted to tell us?
Yes, just about, it wasn't a conventional police force. Obviously, the British South Africa Police was a paramilitary force, necessary because of its history and because of what was happening in the country when I joined, as in a terrorist emergency. So to do that in the depot, as I referred to already, we did a couple of weeks counter-insurgency training, coin training we used to call it. And a memorable occasion there, one of the big things on the coin training was water discipline. Now, you know, I was an Englishman, I am an Englishman. I didn't have water discipline, we were never short of water, so I didn't, particularly like having to limit my water intake. But it was hot out there for me because I was from the freezing cold north of England. So this one occasion during coin, when we actually went to Inyanga and sort of mock patrols, although there was terrorists operating in that area at the time, it was 1975. And we set up camp as a sort of patrol thing. And the instructor said to us, right, there's lion here. I said, what? I'm from England, there's lions in this area. I said, you are joking, I'm from Yorkshire, mate. He said, no, there is wild animals and lions. He said, the way to defeat the lion, of course, in real circumstances, is to urinate around your tent at night because they can't stand the smell of human urine. So I thought, oh my God, this played on my mind. We went to bed about 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock that night when lights were out in this tent. Alone, I was alone in this tent. And I thought, God, what if a lion comes, man? I've been used to cats and dogs in the UK, and budgies maybe, and gerbils and things. So anyway, it was playing on my mind. I was laid in a sleeping bag, and we were going the next day on a 30-mile patrol through the African bush up and down the hills. So I snuck out of my tent probably about half an hour later when everybody's settled down, and there was a water bowser there, a big, tank that you hitch to the back of your Land Rovers. And I laid under the water bowser, hopefully covertly, and turned the tap on so I could fill myself with water so I could urinate around the tent and keep the lions away. Sadly, I got caught by the chief instructor. And myself and one other offender who'd had a similar idea, who was a farm boy from Rhodesia, great bloke. So we got caught. So the next day, he made me the radio operator, which I thought sounded like a really cushy number, because I could use a radio having been in the British Army. And he sent us to the top of this hill, Gomo, was the parlance in Rhodesian terms. A big hill, very high. He said, right, take your radio kit, get to the top of that, establish a radio relay station, and you can do all the comms for the various patrols that go out in different directions in the hills of Inyanga. Okay, fine, that sounds like a good plan for me. No walking. So he said, oh yeah, and by the way, boys, there was two of us. He said, take this massive compo box. Now there was rat packs, ration packs, little boxes with your food in, and then there was a compo packs in which the rat packs would be contained. There might have been 50 or 60, anyway, they were heavy, full of tin cans and stuff. So he made us carry this ration pack up to the top of the hill, which was probably, about roughly the size of Mount Everest, but a long way up there in the blistering heat. And I couldn't lift the box by myself from the ground at the base camp. So two of us struggled up this hill with it. It took us hours, by which time we were exhausted. Got to the top, and the top of the Gomo, the hill, was a flat rock. It was like just a smooth rock peak. So it was difficult to set up a base camp. I put an aerial up and we got the comms going eventually. To find, after my lion experience, that it was full of baboons at the top. And this guy that I was with, Rob they call him, was a farm boy. He knew all about baboons. Baboons are quite nasty animals if you piss them off. And we laid there on top of this rock in the sun. I got my eyelids sunburned, it was that hot, for days, doing this radio procedure thing. And these baboons kept wanting to come near. He was shouting at them, making funny noises at them, and they seemed to disperse with that. But what an experience, baboons, lions. Anyway, so I'm digressing now. So another good war story. Everybody likes a good war story. I was on a base camp called Malapati. It was in the Sabi TTL, and probably about 100 k's short of Buhira, right in the sticks. And we used to go on that dirt road from that base camp down towards Umtali. You could go through the bush towards Umtali. You come out at Birchnough Bridge on the tar road. That's the first tar road you hit. So my boss in Buhira, who was a detective inspector in Special Branch, said to me, Jim, I want you to drive down that road and make your way to Umtali. It was probably 200, 300 k's of dirt, the whole journey. He said, and see if we can draw some terrorists out of the bushes, So if you get ambushed, you'll be able to kill a few. Yeah, okay, boss, no problem. And I thought I hadn't signed up for this anyway. So yeah, we're driving down two Land Rovers, SB Land Rovers. SB Land Rover was a Land Rover with no doors, the doors taken off so you could get out of the vehicle quickly. Adapted seatbelts, so you had like a full harness on which you slap the middle of and it would release straight away. Quick release harnesses instead of seatbelts. They were also equipped with a sawn-off AK rifle under the bonnet, which you fired by pulling the choke out. And at the back in both directions at the back of the vehicle, you'd have two more AK rifles, and you'd press a pair of solenoid buttons on what used to be the rear view mirror, and that would fire them. So you had some firepower before you started using your own weapons if you got into an ambush. Anyway, I'm driving, I've got a new guy, a new PO, Gary, I won't mention his name. I met him the other week actually, again. But so we're driving along this dirt road, and what the terrorists used to do is put logs across the road to impede the progress of the military convoys, which of course was us. So we're driving along, weaving in and out of these roads. So you didn't drive over them, you drive around them, which caused you to go off a narrow dirt road into the bush. We're driving along, dodging these logs. Gary was on my left-hand side, yeah, and I was driving. So we got detoured off the main drive, and we hit this tree which the terrorists had put a booby trap in, which is actually in the form of a Chinese stick grenade. So when you went and disturbed the bush, the branches, it would pull a nylon cord and that would pop the Chinese stick grenade, which would go bang at head height, which wasn't good. So thank God I was driving, because on the left-hand side of the vehicle, it popped, and poor Gary, who just joined the force. I mean, he was 6 months out of depot at that. It exploded and injured his ear. So, of course, you drive through it, get out of the way, stop, regroup. And the road between that log that I'd avoided and the next log up the road, I could see it maybe 300 or 400 metres. Cheers, man. We could keep this out of the way.
Yeah, cheers.
Cheers, man. Our convoy actually consisted that day of 2 SP Land Rovers and a troop carrier, armoured personnel carrier, if you like, called the Puma, which was mine-proof as well. They were at the rear. They were manned by police reserve, guys from town who were civilians but got called up. So I stopped the vehicles between the 2 logs. I said, listen, this next one might be booby-trapped as well. So, foolishly, a whim, I got a long piece of rope out the back of our Land Rover, walked forward to the next log across the roadblock, and tied this rope to the roadblock. Then I dressed back about 100 metres. The convoy was all sat there watching me, you know, a safe distance away. And I pulled the rope to move the log, so we didn't have to drive around it and risk an ambush or a booby trap. And it went bang. There was two TM-46 Russian anti-tank mines, which were booby traps onto the log. So there was a huge, tremendous bang. I could hear these people screaming, "What, you're a lunatic," you know. And that's how we cleared the log off the road, so we didn't have to go into the bush and risk more ambushes and stuff. So that's the kind of thing you get up to when you're in the BSAP. You know, you're a policeman. Most people do traffic and things like that. But we were required to do all these crazy improvised things, which made the force a lot of fun. So that's one. Anyway, did I finish my lion story? Yeah, I didn't. So yeah, anyway, another occasion, talking about crime now. Just have a beer because I'm drying up here. I was sent down to Bulawayo, this is when I was in the drug squad, to catch a ex-terrorist called Hitler. I won't give you his surname, he's probably still alive. And Hitler was, apart from being a terrorist, was a drug dealer as well. Big time drug dealer in Bulawayo. That's the second city of Rhodesia, the first city being Salisbury. They've all changed the names now, of course, because things have changed. But so I went down to Bulawayo on the overnight train, and I had to pretend to be a down and out hooligan looking druggie, which is no problem for me. So I'm on the streets of Bulawayo. I'd never been to Bulawayo at that time. I'm Salisbury Drug Squad. I'm in Bulawayo on the streets, living on the streets, staying in cheap flop houses for about a week, until trying to make contact with this drug dealer, which I successfully did in the end, because I met another criminal, a European guy. There was a big, well-known criminal in Salisbury. I won't mention his name, but Johnny was his first name. And I knew him because I'd arrested him several times in Salisbury for, you know, petty drugs offences. So I got Johnny. I said to him, "Listen, do you know this guy?" And of course he did. He was from Salisbury, by the way, but he was in Bulawayo at the time. He said, "Yeah, he knew him." Hitler? "Yeah, I know him." I said, "Arrange a meet and let me buy, you know, $200 or $300 worth of dacha, which is marijuana." They used to sell it in twists and cobs. It's a long story, but anyway, there are different forms of packaging it and selling it, different prices for each. So long story short, I got Johnny to set me up a meeting with this terrorist and drug dealer, Hitler. And I arranged to buy a suitcase full of dacha, grass, marijuana, in a suburb on the outside, an African township on the outskirts of Bulawayo, at midnight. I thought, what am I doing here? You know. So I took Johnny with me to be the introducer of this guy face-to-face live on. So I went to the appointed meeting place in this township, pitch black, with terrorists and things, and met Hitler. Was introduced by Johnny to this Hitler guy. He had a suitcase with him. I checked the suitcase, it was full of dacha. So I gave him the money. I can't remember how much it was now. But I'd secreted a gun down my Super Pro, the shoes we used to wear in Rhodesia. Super Pro, it's like a sort of baseball boot thing. I had a small, very small pistol down that boot on the right-hand side. And we went out there in a taxi, a Rixie taxi, Renault 4, very popular at the time. And Hitler didn't want to play. When I gave him the money and gave him the suitcase, I said, "Right, you're nicked." Not quite in those words, but you know. He said, "No, I'm not," and started fighting. So I tried to didn't want to be arrested. He didn't like me much, and he thought Johnny was a very bad guy for switching him off, ratting out on him. So we had to physically fight him. I mean, he was struggling and going to run. I didn't know if he was armed or not. Anyway, we eventually got him into the back of this very small taxi, as I say, a Renault 4. And I put him sat between us, so Johnny was on the right, I was on the left, and he was in the middle of the back seat. The taxi driver we hadn't briefed because I didn't want any risk of him finding out, that we were doing an operation on him. So I said to the taxi driver, obviously an African guy who turned white by then with fear because there's 2 Europeans and an African struggling in the back of a taxi, smacking each other in the head and blood and snot and all that. I said, take me to Bulawayo Police Station, Central Station in Bulawayo. That's where I was going to take this guy to lock him up for the night. And the taxi driver was frozen with terror, he wouldn't move. So I got this gun out that was tucked down by a super pro, put it in the back of his neck and said, drive to the police station now, you silly person, you. And we hurtled off at ridiculous speed to Bulawayo Central Police Station with this accused guy in the back. Anyway, that was an arrest. That's a bit more on the crime side of things. Contacts, yeah. Well, my very first one, I was again at Chilwi Base Camp in Sabi TTL. And I was with a guy called Simon. Again, I was driving. And we're driving on a dirt road, of course. And we suddenly took fire from the left-hand side. It was like a linear ambush from the left. So there's maybe 10, 15 terrorists lined up with AKs, RPDs, and all that, rockets, RPG-7s and stuff like that, RPG-3s. Obviously wanting to take the vehicle, that was 2 vehicles, a SP Land Rover and another SP Land Rover behind us. Sam was a European, as was I. The back vehicle was driven by my African detectives. So we took this fire, it was quite intense, not too bad, but it was quite intensive fire. So Simon started firing back with his FN rifle at the area where the ambush was coming from. And a hot doppy, a hot expended cartridge hit him on the ear, and he screamed like a stuck pig. He thought he'd been shot because the hot when they come out of the weapon, He's screaming and shouting. I was like, first time, I was panicking, thinking, Christ, what he's hit, my mate's down. And I immediately crashed into a tree, which is not the way to do an ambush drill. You're supposed to drive straight, so if I hit this tree, the Land Rover came to a crunch. The Land Rover at the back of me hit me, and we're all stuck in Land Rovers. Can't get out on one side because it's all forest. The other side we're open flare again, just taking the fire. Anyway, so we put fire down, and they ran away. Thank God. But that's not the way to handle an ambush, I mean, the contact. Basically, it was like the Keystone Cops on speed, not the way to do it, not in the manual. But that's another little skirmish. I was at a place called Nyamaropa, up near the Mozambique border, past Nyanga. That was a really, really dodgy place at the time when I was there. I was there about 78, maybe 77. And you could see the valley, this valley down below you, and you could see the Mozambique border. And we were sat on the veranda one day having a beer at this base camp. It was a rough life. And you could see terrorists coming from Mozambique. That was one of the routes into Rhodesia for these terrorists to come at us, to enter our country and, kill us basically. And so the army were contacted, the RLI, which my good friend John here was part of. Fire Force came. They're the helicopters with the guys that jump out and kill people. Very good unit, brilliant soldiers. Used to jump from low altitude and all that sort of thing. Anyway, out they popped. We could see the choppers coming there and the goops coming across this sort of open flare field out of the woods from Mozambique. So a contact ensued. That's where you make contact with the enemy. There's a firefight where you're actually fighting them. And we had a ringside view of this from this veranda where we were still continuing to drink our beer. They were firing enough away, it didn't bother us. We were on a hill. And the army came in and we just watched. It was like a movie, like Apocalypse Now, but better. So that was another little experience. I mean, there's so many. It was a daily occurrence when you were doing an operational area, And I served in Thrasher, Tangent, Hurricane, and Repulse. So I've done a few operational areas. And as I say, one of the best parts of my career.
Yeah.
One more good, what's the word? Feel-good story. There was a Joint Operations Centre, a forward jock in a place called Motoko. Motoko, I had a fantastic time. I was the special branch representative at the jock. So it was several services were there, the Air Force, the Coloured Protection Unit, Police, Special Branch, and elements of Army. I can't remember exactly who was there. But one of these reservists that I keep telling you about, he was actually in real life a chef at the top hotel in Salisbury called Meikles. And it was Christmas. We were all out and about patrolling and stuff like that. We all came back to the base camp to celebrate Christmas, those of us that weren't working. So Christmas came, and the chef from Meikles, who was on call as an army cook, cooked us the most fantastic Christmas lunch. Turkey, you've never had a better Christmas in your life, And that was in a tent, a big tent, with 100 guys in it from the base camp. Just sat around and had Christmas dinner. It was absolutely. Then you'd get back in your Land Rover and go and hit a few landmines,
Yeah.
It was cool.
Really cool. Were you in your mid-20s then?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, 24, maybe.
Days,
Oh,
sure.
the best time of my life. I mean, so many guys have done so well since then. I was telling you, I went to America, got recruited to go to America with a team of Brits to help out a billionaire. And the first thing I did, they made me the chief investigator and intel officer for the unit. The unit was about 30 strong. This is in Miami, Florida. And the first thing I did was I opened a mini BSAP station with, the documents, the whole thing. I created a BSAP station. I also prosecuted some cases in front of the then state attorney for Florida, Janet Reno, who then became the United States Attorney General. And she said, "My God, where have you come from?" I had a BSAP station there, and it worked. So yeah, I've had some good times. And I know other guys that went to Papua New Guinea, Royal Papua New Guinea Constabulary, several Rhodesian policemen. Martin Powers, if you're out there, I'm saying hello. Well done. So anyway, I eventually ended up as one of their international security team. Several countries doing banking security and everything to do with security. I started off in Saudi, went to Dubai, Mexico, Hong Kong, had a really good blast, and the head of that when I was serving was Chris, I won't mention your name, Chris, who was the head of international security. So there was a few roadies went through that organisation. I did that for 20 years. Sure. So we've had some good times. I mean, God bless the boys who served, not just the police, the army, the air force, everybody. But yeah, it was an experience and a half, and I'm glad I did it.
Yeah. Well, I think you've earned your Rhodesian citizenship there.
I hope so. I hope so.
Yeah. Well, I suppose
Cheers, John.
Cheers, brother. Rhodesia was built on a bunch of POMs, including Cecil John Rhodes himself.
Absolutely.
He was a POM, and for decades we were loyal to the Crown and the Queen. World War I, World War II.
In fact, the Queen Mother was the honorary commissioner of the BSAP, the British Queen Mother.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny how the BSAP started off as security for a mining company. And you were all employees of
the Pioneer Column.
Yeah, the Pioneer Column. And so it was always a bit of a paramilitary force too,
Absolutely,
wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Same with the Botswana Border Police, also paramilitary in a way, which kind of is how Patu and the Black Boots and those guys, all support unit, all part of the, in a way, the history of the BSAP has always been.
He's rich.
Yeah, it's a very
rich tapestry.
Yeah, rich tapestry.
Enough said.
Yeah.
No, it's full of characters. I mean, we had public school boys, we had people like me, ordinary working class Brits. We had lords. There's another one. Lord. Oh no, perhaps not. I can't really mention his name. Bernie, we'll call him, was a black sheep remittance man from a very, very wealthy family in the UK, and I was fortunate enough to serve with him. Super guy.
Yeah.
We had all sorts.
It's funny how those formative years in the Rhodesian forces set up so many guys for their careers.
And some have done really well.
Yeah, some of them did amazingly well. I mean...
But then there was me.
I look at guys like Fergus O'Brien and, even chaps like Nigel Henson, and I mean, so many of them have done so well for themselves.
And deservedly so.
Yeah. And Trevor Desfountain, he became head of civil defence for the whole city of Cape Town. And, he used to give talks and lectures based on his experience as a high-ranking officer in the Rhodesian Army. He knew exactly how to organise all the different, if there was a nuclear explosion at Coburg nuclear plant, who's in charge of what, and acting as liaison for all the different ambulance, police, fire, all the rest of it. I mean, these guys were really brilliant at what they did, and their brilliance came from the training they had in Rhodesia during the war.
Absolutely.
Because I think we were so young, it was unusual for such young people to have so much responsibility thrust on them at such an early age.
That's the very thing, yeah.
And it was a bit of a sink or swim thing where you chucked in the deep end.
Absolutely right.
And you got it on the head. Yeah, you got to sink or swim. And so consequently, you got guys at the age of 25 coming out of there with probably more experience than most guys ever get in their whole lives.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely, that was the great thing about it. It gave you confidence, you know,
Yeah.
which is a big thing.
Yeah,
And ability as well.
yeah.
And leadership, you know. No, there were good times. I wouldn't swap it for the world.
I have to show you guys what we're looking at outside the window here. That's our view. Not too shabby. Anyway, thanks for watching this video, guys. Appreciate your support for the channel.